are honored to have a dear friend here with us today. And I say a dear friend, when the chamber first started, the University of Pittsburgh was one of our first presidential roundtable members, having met and talked with the chairman at that time of U.S. Steel, who was leading the effort for us. Pitt not only engaged us, but they became a meaningful partner. They set up our first How to Do Business workshop that we had down on 2nd Avenue. And so we learned a lot from that model and continued it forward. But let me tell you a little bit about our speaker. Mark Nordenberg joined the faculty of the University of Pittsburgh School of Law in 1977, where he quickly built himself a reputation as an outstanding teacher and was the initial recipient of the school's Excellence in Teaching Award and one of the first faculty members to receive the university-wide Chancellor's Distinguished Teaching Award. Early in his career, Mark served at the university as the Dean of the School of Law and as the interim provost. In 1955, we don't have to tell dates.
95.
1995. 1995, he was elected interim chancellor by the university's Board of Trustees, and in 1996, following a national search, was elected chancellor. And what a joy it was for the University of Pittsburgh. He served in that role until 2014, and under his leadership, the university achieved new levels of quality and the impact on virtually every front. Undergraduate applications and academic credentials of enrolled students soared. Faculty and students received the highest forms of national and international recognition, and Pitt consistently ranked among the top universities in federal research awards, which is a very big deal. And the university successfully completed a $2 billion capital campaign. Now Chancellor Emeritus Nordenberg has received many important honors. Among them, he has been named Pittsburgh's Person of the Year by Pittsburgh Magazine, a history maker by the Senator John Heinz History Center. And to celebrate his remarkable progress amongst receiving his awards during his first decade as chancellor, trustee, alumni leaders, and other friends contributed $2.5 million to endow the Chancellor Mark A. Nordenberg Chair. Now that's impressive. Mark Nordenberg is an honored graduate of the North Allegheny High School, Thiel College, and the University of Wisconsin's Law School. Chancellor Emeritus Nordenberg now serves as the chair of the university's Institute of Politics. For 30 years, the Institute has provided a nonpartisan forum for the consideration of policy issues and the importance to the region by elected officials and other civic leaders. To add to that, Chancellor Emeritus Nordenberg serves as the director of the Dick Thornburg Forum on Law and Public Policy, named after former U.S. Attorney General and two-term governor of Pennsylvania. Chancellor Emeritus Nordenberg has been married to his wife, Dr. Nikki Perello Nordenberg, for more than 48 years. He has 3 grown children and 4 grandchildren. Join me, if you will, in welcoming our speaker, Chancellor Emeritus Mark Nordenberg.
You know, that was such a nice introduction that I hate to begin on a somber note. But for the last 3 or 4 months, I've invested a lot of time, and it's been my privilege to serve on a special committee created by the Jewish Federation in the wake of the killings at the Tree of Life Synagogue. And in that role, not only have I become closer to the Jewish community in Pittsburgh, but I've had the chance to meet personally with family members of those who were killed, with those who were seriously wounded. I know of the strong links that now exist between Pittsburgh and Charleston, South Carolina, and particularly the Mother Emanuel AME Church, where worshipers were basically executed by someone they had invited into their midst and who had joined them in prayer. And this morning we woke up to the news that 49 people had been killed in mosques in New Zealand. Any killing is tragic, but I do think that when people are essentially slaughtered in their places of worship, that reflects a kind of hate-driven barbarity that we really need to begin addressing. And so I thought maybe this morning it would be appropriate for us to begin with a moment of silence for all of the victims of hate here, in other parts of the country, and in other parts of the world. Thanks very much. I did think that I should go back and make something clear about that very nice introduction that Doris gave to me. First, it was 1995, not 1955. I became the occupant of the Chancellor's office. And I also want to make clear that I received the Chancellor's Excellence in Teaching Award before I was Chancellor. There was no backroom deals that were producing that. It really is a pleasure for me to be with you this morning. Of course, I welcome any occasion that brings me into the company of Doris Carson Williams, someone for whom I have a great respect, and someone who really has been working hard to make Pittsburgh a better place for a lot of years, as I have tried to follow her model. In fact, in preparing for today's presentation, I came across this newspaper clipping. It's so grainy that you can hardly make out any of the words, which just proves my point, that Doris has been at the task of making Pittsburgh a better place for a long time. This is an article that dealt with a 1977 election that Doris lost. And in 1977, I came to the University of Pittsburgh as a visiting assistant professor of law, the lowliest form of academic life, with a 9-month contract and absolutely no prospects. I was basically expected to ride off into the setting sun with absolutely no fanfare the following summer. And I'd say, Doris, from those beginnings in 1977, we've done pretty well. Here you are, the longtime, highly respected leader of this distinguished group, and I still have a job. So we have things to celebrate this morning. To be clear, my feelings of respect also extend to the group that Doris leads. The African American Chamber of Commerce is a very special part of Pittsburgh. We at Pitt have tried to be a good partner with the Chamber. I have spoken to the group before. When I did that, it was in another role as Chancellor of the University, and I am here today, as Doris has indicated, as Chair of Pitt's Institute of Politics. And so it is my plan to first provide you with a general overview of the Institute and how it tries to make a positive difference in this region. And then I want to focus for a while on one of our key current projects, criminal justice reform. And I chose that topic because I think it will be of interest to you, because it does provide some sense of how it is the Institute of Politics, or IOP as it is often called, is able to bring people together to get things done. And because I think ultimately success in that effort, as is true of success in many of the things that we do, depends upon the support of community leaders like those of you who have gathered here today. So to go back to the beginning, not 1955, but 1987. In 1987, the University of Pittsburgh marked its bicentennial, its 200th birthday. And at that time, then Chancellor Wes Posvar assembled a group of about 100 civic leaders as an advisory board. And he asked them, among other things, what could Pitt do to enhance its impact in moving forward with a public service mission? And their answer was to create an Institute of Politics and Policy. It took a couple of years, but in 1989, exactly 30 years ago this year, Pitt's Institute of Politics was launched. And I would say that Chancellor Posvar made two really key decisions back in those days. The first was just to start the Institute of Politics, and the second was to select Mo Coleman as its founding director. And as you can see, if you can see from the title of his memoir, which is up there on the screen, Mo devoted his life to the search for common ground. In fact, in that book, Mo said this about his career: repeatedly, I chose to submerge my own strong political and social views in order to play a credible, neutral, mediating role, because in most cases I saw that role going unfilled. I believe that the role for such mediating influences is even greater today, as our political environment has become increasingly polarized. And you really could view the Institute of Politics as the institutional expression of that particular perspective. Our traditional mission has been to serve as a neutral, nonpartisan forum for elected officials and other civic leaders to address policy issues of importance to the region. We are committed to civil discussion and to evidence-based decision-making, two values that too often seem to be left behind in public life in America today. At certain stages of our work, we deliberately fly under the radar because we want to provide an off-the-record forum where people can express preliminary thoughts as a part of a give and take, without fearing that they will somehow be politically punished at some point down the road. Once policy positions are developed, we become far more public. But even at that stage, we tend to function more as educators and less as advocates, though the line between those two roles sometimes can become blurry. Mo Coleman's influence continues to be felt in other ways too. Samantha Balbier, who assumed the role of IOP director in January, is a Mo Coleman protege, someone he described as one of the best students he'd ever had in his many decades of teaching. Samantha launched her career on the front lines as a caseworker in the Intensive Family Services Unit of the Erie County Office of Children and Youth. Having grabbed a graduate degree and made a number of other stops, she was the executive director of the Greater Pittsburgh Nonprofit Partnership when we recruited her to the Institute in January. The GPNP, as it is called, includes more than 450 organizations across a 12-county region of southwestern Pennsylvania, and provides an array of services that are intended to help the nonprofit sector be a collaborative driver of positive change. Samantha is here today on the screen and in person, so I'd just like to introduce her to you. And while everybody is clapping for Samantha, let me also acknowledge Betsy Farmer, who is the Dean of the School of Social Work at the University of Pittsburgh, both Samantha's school and Mo Coleman's school. Betsy, it's nice to have you here. Not only does the IOP have a new director, but as Doris suggested, we also have two relatively new programs that complement the traditional mission that I have just described. About 5 years ago, Henry Hillman endowed the L.C. Hillman Civic Forum, which is part of the Institute of Politics and which has as its mission developing a culture of commitment to civic engagement within the University of Pittsburgh student body. It is the home to a number of important programs. Last month, just to give one example, we hosted our annual Never a Spectator program, which involved about 150 students, 25 community mentors, and a keynote address by Sean Robinson, one of our former football players who was the honored recipient of the 2008 President's Lifetime Achievement Award for volunteer service for his role in founding and leading a group called Orange Arrow, which recruits and trains current college student athletes to younger boys and girls. He gave a terrific presentation, and it was a wonderful program. And just a few months ago, we also did move the Dick Thornburg Forum on Law and Public Policy into the Institute. So Samantha now, to get the hat straight, is the director of the Institute of Politics and the director of the L.C. Hillman Forum, and I'm the chair of the Institute of Politics and the director of the Dick Thornburg Forum. The Thornburg Forum offers programs both for campus constituents and for the broader community. Last month, for example, we had Charlie Dent, the former congressman from Eastern Pennsylvania, who talked about American politics in the New World Order. On Tuesday of this coming week, we'll host a lecture by David Shribman, the Pulitzer Prize-winning former executive editor of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, who's going to talk about, and here's a provocative title for you, the press, the truth, and other endangered species. And what I would say is any of you who are interested are welcome at that lecture or at any of the programs of the Thornburg Forum. Now, the addition of the L.C. Hillman Forum and the Dick Thornburg Forum really, to my mind, provided the Institute of Politics with a perfect array of programming. Because the L.C. Forum is focused on Pitt students and has as its mission nurturing this commitment to civic engagement. The Thornburg Forum deals mainly with national issues and targets both the campus community and the broader community. And the Institute of Politics focuses exclusively on regional issues and has its principal working relationships with elected officials and other civic leaders. The agenda for this regional issues role tends to develop in two ways. We have 8 policy committees: economic development, education, environment, fiscal policy and governance, health and human services, infrastructure, public safety and emergency preparedness, and workforce development. And very frequently then the issues that we take on throughout the Institute will bubble up from the work of those policy committees. But we also try, and we've tried even harder to do this in the last few years, we try to be responsive to elected officials who have important issues that they would like to address, but who, particularly on the local level, often are lacking in the resources to really undertake a study of those issues or to pull together the people who would be needed as participants to generate policies that would be desirable for the entire region. Recent projects have been as varied as the changing face of poverty, the opioid overdose epidemic, incarceration policies and practices, structural alternatives for financially distressed municipalities, urban agriculture, and the dangers presented in terms of lead contamination of soil and air when older structures are being torn down and replaced. And to give you some sense of what I mean about our commitment to being bipartisan, our poverty initiative was co-chaired by Dave Reed, who then was the Republican majority leader in the State House of Representatives, and Dan Frankel, who was the Democratic caucus leader in the State House of Representatives. The initiative that resulted in our recommendation that financially distressed municipalities be given the option to voluntarily disincorporate was co-chaired by Jim Roddy and Dan Honorato, the former Republican county executive and the former Democratic county executive. Our criminal justice reform initiative has been co-chaired by Fred Tiemann, a former United States attorney here in Pittsburgh and also the former president of the Buell Foundation, and by me. And as I said, I want to spend some time talking about that initiative today as a model of the ways in which the Institute of Politics can do distinctive forms of work. And in doing that, I also want to acknowledge a third person in the room, Aaron Lauer, who is a senior policy analyst at the Institute of Politics and whose work has been absolutely indispensable in keeping this criminal justice reform and a lot of other important projects moving forward. So Aaron, raise your hand so people can know who you are. We launched our criminal justice initiative at our annual elected officials retreat in the fall of 2015, which had as one focus the issue of mass incarceration. Our timing was perfect because we chose that topic in the spring, but then in the summer, strong bipartisan support for incarceration reform almost exploded. And it really emerged in light of the undesirable and increasingly visible consequences of the widespread implementation of get-tough approaches to sentencing, such as rigid mandatory minimum sentences and 3 strikes and you're out provisions. Those consequences were described in a cover story in The Economist, which labeled America the jailhouse nation and reported that per head, the incarceration rate in the land of the free has risen sevenfold since the 1970s and now is 5 times Britain's, 9 times Germany's, and 14 times Japan's. A cover story in the New York Times magazine was entitled The Bail Trap and reported that every year thousands of innocent people are sent to jail only because they can't pull together $500. The article went on to describe how when people are sent to jail only because they cannot afford to post bail, they are put at risk of losing their jobs, custody of their children, even their lives, before they have been found guilty of anything. These practices have had a real impact on individuals, on families, and on communities. Beyond that, because of disparities in the populations most directly affected, these practices have triggered questions about fundamental fairness. They also have contributed to the financial stresses felt by governments at every level. In a sense, then, it was not surprising that in the aftermath of that retreat, County Executive Rich Fitzgerald came to the Institute of Politics and asked if we would assemble a group of civic leaders to examine incarceration practices and policies in Allegheny County. And we really limited ourselves to Allegheny County because we didn't want to have to go to Harrisburg, and we didn't want to have to go to Washington. We wanted to focus on things that we thought we could do ourselves. And his mission for us was to determine what could be done to make our current system of criminal justice fairer and less costly without compromising public safety. Working with County Executive Fitzgerald, Fred and I pulled together a 40-person task force. It included a cross-section of leaders from within the system. So the president, judge, and the chief of police, and the warden, and the public defender, and others all were a part of the group. It included distinguished academics with strong reputations in areas like criminology and law and psychiatry that were directly related to the issues that we knew we would confront. And it included civic leaders like me, a person who had a real interest in the topic but who could not claim any special experience or expertise that would be brought to the discussions. The task force met for the better part of a year. Before each session, Aaron, who is a Pitt Law grad, would write and distribute a brief on the area that would be discussed in an effort to kind of close the knowledge gap between those of us who had little or limited experience and those who basically had built their professional lives within the system. And in a typical session, we would bring in a national leader who would talk about best practices nationally. We then would hear from whomever it was in the county who was responsible for that area, so we would get the local context, and then there would be discussion. To the extent possible, our work was data-driven. And I will say that Allegheny County really stands apart from almost any county in the country in terms of the strength of its information and data systems. In November of 2016, we released our report, which is available on the IOP website. Given the critical interests involved, and I think consistent with this quest for common ground, we began with a statement of guiding principles. And we framed those principles this way. Number one, the preservation of public safety through effective law enforcement that is protective of individual rights is a responsibility of good government. And so we acknowledge from the start that public safety is a fundamental value for most of us, but also took note of the individual rights and limitations on law enforcement that, in my mind, really do a good bit of defining what it means to be an American. Second, depriving a person of his or her freedom through the criminal justice system prior to an adjudication of guilt is a serious and intrusive action to be used wisely by governments created to respect and preserve individual liberty. So again, right from the start, we're kind of highlighting the difference between prisons, which hold those essentially who have been adjudicated guilty, and jails, which include a big part of their population, people who have not been adjudicated guilty of anything. They have been charged with something and are being held until there can be an adjudication. Third, incarceration and other forms of correctional control should be used judiciously with careful balancing of the goals of punishment and deterrence, preserving public safety, respecting victims' rights, maximizing opportunities for rehabilitation, and conserving scarce government resources. And here what I would say is that it certainly is my view, but I think it was the view of the task force that for the last 25 years there had been little balancing. Instead, sentencing was driven by the notion that you should lock them up and throw away the key, a philosophy that has proven not to be particularly effective. Fourth, the processes of the criminal justice system should be fair, socially and financially equitable, and structured to avoid even the appearance of bias, particularly racial or ethnic bias. And to me, again, that really is a value that is consistent with the country in which we live. And we also have seen the problems that can surface in communities where there is a widespread belief that the system is not fair. Fifth, the criminal justice system and all expenditures made in support of it must be cost-effective and subject to appropriate oversight and budgetary review, as is true of all operations of government. You know, and here I would draw a comparison to the defense budget nationally, which always was kind of sacrosanct, and it may be returning to that point even as we speak. But the same was true with public safety. It isn't true today because we all have seen how financial constraints can end up creating layoffs in police departments and changes of that type. But really, jails and prisons have been viewed by those who are their principal patrons, the police. And you know, close to 130 different police departments in Allegheny County with very wide disparities, and disparities that are not explainable in their use of the county jail as basically a free resource. Well, it isn't free. Finally, in a society characterized by dramatic advances in information systems, modern methods should be employed to obtain the most timely and pertinent data that would be useful in supporting fact-based decision-making and transparency within the criminal justice system. And here again, Allegheny County has a real leg up because they have great people who have created great information systems that don't quite measure up to what we would like in the criminal justice system yet, but we have a great starting point. Now, this initiative in the main was driven by what we saw as a basic disconnect, and that is the rate of crime, and particularly the rate of violent crime was going down. And at the same time, the prison population kept going up, which really didn't make much sense. Beyond that, there are some findings in our 2016 report that really are attention-grabbing. Allegheny County spends the equivalent of at least 42 cents of every property tax dollar it receives on the criminal justice system. Now, it's not 42% of the total budget because particularly in the child and family services area, you've got a lot of federal dollars that come in and are essentially pass-throughs. But if you take the expenditures on the criminal justice system, they represent 42% of the property tax dollars that are collected by the county. Second, the dramatic increase in the population of the Allegheny County Jail over the past 2 decades has translated into more than $12 million in additional annual costs for county taxpayers. Third, black men in Allegheny County are booked into jail at nearly twice the national rate for black men, which is itself 6 times higher than the national rate for white men. And to carry that one step further, although they make up just more than 13% of the population of Allegheny County, black people make up 49% of the population of the Allegheny County Jail. Fifth, in the Allegheny County Jail, 75% of inmates have either drug or alcohol issues or mental illness issues, and 48% have both. The report closes with a series of recommendations. 3 were directed to the county executive himself. The first of those recommendations was to create a panel that could measure and publicly report on the progress that was or was not being made in the implementation of the recommendations. And County Executive Fitzgerald did appoint a progress review panel, which is co-chaired by Fred Tiemann and me. Its other members are, you can't see them up there, but Al Bloomstein, the Stockholm Prize-winning criminologist from Carnegie Mellon University. In criminology, the Stockholm Prize is like the Nobel Prize. Kenya Boswell, the president of the Bank of New York Mellon Foundation. Quentin Bullock, the president of CCAC. Susan Everingham, formerly the director of the RAND office here in Pittsburgh, and now it's director of innovation architecture. Jeff Finkelstein, the president and CEO of the Jewish Federation of Pittsburgh. Glenn Grayson, the pastor of the Wesley Center AME Zion Church, and Matt Smith, the president of the Greater Pittsburgh Chamber of Commerce. And with the exception of former Senator Smith, all of the Progress Panel members had served on our original task force, so they already know about the system and have demonstrated their commitment to positive change in the system by their service to date. We recruited Matt Smith because we thought it was very important to have the business community involved in this and supportive of our recommendations. The second recommendation was that the county employ a criminal justice coordinator who could penetrate existing silos and help the county more effectively pursue these goals. And Rich Fitzgerald exceeded our wildest expectations when he was able to recruit Ed Mulvey to that position. Ed is a professor of psychiatry at Pitt, where he serves as the director of the Law and Psychiatry program. He also has served as chair of the U.S. Department of Justice Office of Justice Programs Scientific Advisory Board. The third recommendation was that the county should build on its considerable technology assets to deliver timely data and analysis to manage the overall system and monitor key performance metrics. And this is a never-ending task, but as I have said, Allegheny County is way ahead in this game. In its 2018 report, which also is available on the IOP website, the Progress Panel identified some areas of progress. For example, there has been a very deliberate effort to have the Public Defender's Office provide representation to defendants at their preliminary arraignments when initial incarceration or no incarceration decisions are made. That has made a big difference in the test program, and so it now is being expanded. There also are efforts underway to reduce court processing times, to reduce the length of probation terms, which are way out of whack here when compared with national norms, to reduce the use of money bond and to provide protections against overcharging. In addition, the county currently is developing a plan to divert more people with mental health issues away from the jail and into treatment. Recently, the county received a major award from the MacArthur Foundation, and the Institute of Politics received a special grant from the Heinz Endowments to push forward with this criminal justice work. And as we do that, we're really focusing on two big questions. One involves jail redesign, so that we aren't caught in a trap that is the incarceration equivalent of if you build it, they will come. If you build it, they will fill it. And we'll be looking at alternative uses of some of those spaces for diversion programs, for education programs. And the second big area on which we will focus is racial disparities. And to be clear, forging progress is going to take real work. I mean, you can imagine how people in the system would react if I strolled in and said, I'm from the IOP and I'd like to help you do your job better. You have to approach it in a different kind of way, even though that is what we're trying to do, is to try to get them to look beyond their daily duties and to think about the big picture and to think about how they could make that big picture even better if they approached certain things in some ways. And I do believe that making our current system of criminal justice fairer and less costly without compromising public safety is an achievable goal. And we're going to keep working at that, just as we're going to keep working on all of the other initiatives that we're pushing forward with at this time. So thank you very much for inviting me to be with you today. It's a pleasure to be back, and I hope you have a wonderful St. Patrick's Day weekend.
We've got time to take maybe one or two questions, two at the max, if you don't mind. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for the presentation. That was very informative. I have a question here. Based on my background as well, I'm from Zimbabwe, and coming in America, I've seen different ways. To what extent has the Institute of Politics has looked into reforming the education system here, given that right now where you live absolutely determines whether you're going to be successful or you're going to end up in the court, just like you mentioned, that a higher rate that a black man is going to be facing a charge. So to what extent has the Institute looked into maybe evening out the education, given that you don't want someone being born and raised in Wilkinsburg compared to someone in South Park, having different probabilities of being successful?
I would say we have tried to help address that in two somewhat different ways. It was not too many years ago, I'm going to say about 3 years ago, that Harrisburg created a fairly broadly representative commission that was supposed to take a serious look at education funding across the state. Because, as you say, the zip code you grow up in may be the strongest determinant of where you end up in life. And so we provided a range of support to that effort, which never seemed to really go anywhere. The other ways in which we have tried to make a contribution is through our Educational Policies Committee and its programs, which are really looking at ways in which we can improve the quality and increase the impact of education across all of the districts. But I think that is a fundamental problem in the country today is the divide between the haves and the have-nots, and you see it right away in school.
Thank you. Time for one more question if you have one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now you see why it was important that we have him here with us today. Let me just take a moment and thank everyone for participating in the How to Do Business with the Port Authority we had last month. Great attendance. Lots of next steps were provided. Our members mixer at the new home of the Pittsburgh Technology Center on the North Shore was just awesome. Our member Audrey Russo just went all out, and we had a full house of people. It was engaging, and everyone had a good time and developed some new relationships out of that. Don't forget the membership survey is out. Everyone received it, right? You didn't fill it out. You have 10 days left to fill it out. If you fill it out, you get to come to a power breakfast, complimentary of the chamber. We need your input on those surveys. Those surveys give us the feedback we need to do more programming for you. We've got several new members. If they're present, I just would like to ask them to stand. Malia Johnson, Johnson Consultants. Maurice Trent, Integrity Contracting. And Byron Clayton, Advanced Robotics for Manufacturing, or ARM Institute, as it is known. It was a break off from Carnegie Mellon University. We also have 3 new members from the Bridgeway Capital Program that we have. And we have some of our junior Chamber of Commerce members here with us today. Thank you for bringing them. Yeah, you want to stand? Be recognized? Yeah. Our junior chamber is our program with Community College of Allegheny County, as you know, and it's going very well. Our Chancellor Emeritus introduced her, but I have to give her a formal introduction, and then she has to spend a couple minutes with me afterwards, since I serve on the Board of Visitors. Dr. Elizabeth Farmer, she is the new Dean at the Graduate School of Social Work at the University of Pittsburgh. Thank you so much. Stand up so everyone can see you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Here. Sure. We've got some upcoming events that are on your table. How to do business with Rivers Casino. That's one you want to be a part of. Our mixer at the Hosanna House Sherwood Conference Center. How to do business with Huntington Bank will be in April, and in April, don't forget, April 23rd is our annual meeting and annual meeting luncheon with the president of Carnegie Mellon University. We are thrilled to have him. Our invitations will be going out soon, but we've already sold 11 tables. So the word's out that he's coming, and I hope you will be there as well. Our candidates forum will be May 9th, where we will be featuring District 4, Councilman Ricky Burgess, and those that are running will also be in attendance. We have a mixer at Arnold's Tea Room on May 29th, and we are hosting our golf clinic on May 31st. This will be different than any that has been held and has raised the bar. It will include C-suite members from major corporations that will play with each team. Team being how to set up a scramble and do a scramble. You'll be getting more information about it, but you gotta be there. But I wanted to let everyone know, and we'll keep you posted. To Mark Nordenberg, Chancellor Emeritus, thank you so much for being with us. We've appreciated it. And finally, I don't know how many of you heard him when he was here. When was that, David?
November 18th.
November. But Skip Spriggs, the President and CEO for the Executive Leadership Council, will be at Pitt. And this is an event that the Chamber is working in collaboration with GISBIA, the school, the Johnson Institute for Responsible Leadership. It's free and open to the public. He is an awesome gentleman and speaker. We want to pack the house, help Kevin Kearns fill it up. If you need more information about it, call us. We'll be sending out another announcement. In the meantime, have a wonderful weekend, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you for being here.